So, even though it's only been a few weeks since the last Cosmic Creations package, I have another one, and this one contains mostly test colors. So these are new colors coming to the shop, or colors that may not come to the shop. So the reason that a shop sends out colors like this is so that their BA team can test out the pigments and give them feedback on formulation. So I am lucky enough that I received this package that contained many new colors. I didn't actually count how many new colors. It also contained a restock of a color for my palette because I am almost out of the yellow Laura makes, which is called Buzzy Bee, which is my absolute favorite yellow in my palette currently from any brand. So I needed a restock of it. You are also in the bottom corner getting a sneak peek of something very new and exciting that is coming out in the next couple weeks. And I've been working on creating content for it. So this batch of new colors contains lots of really fun granulating colors and some more basic colors. And most of the more basic colors are browns and neutrals, because for a long time Laura didn't have any in her shop, and she has since extended that collection quite a lot, and so I have, I think, almost all of them. I might be missing a few. I also got several more of her greens, which I think means I've got all of her greens, and there are a few purples thrown in for good measure. There's also a very exciting blue and a very exciting red. The red is based around an extinct pigment that she's testing to replace Alizarian Crimson, because even though I use Alizarian Crimson in paintings, it's technically not light fast. Though Michael Wilcox did a great discussion with Jackson's if you want to hear about his opinion on light fastness, which is pretty much how I feel about light fastness, which is, well, the window tests are great. We don't store our paintings in a window for a year or multiple years, and so light fastness tests should be, if you're doing your own, should be conducted in the way you use and display your art. So it's a great discussion, and I will see if I can link to somebody else's YouTube video. I don't know if I can. It was incredibly humid, and so you can see that a little bit of the metal is stuck on the top of Buzzy Bee and on top of one of the purples. It's no issue. I popped them in the freezer and the metal came off. I was just really impatient, and so didn't put the entire box in the freezer before unwrapping them, because that would have meant I had to wait to open these all up, and I was not going to do that. I sort of grouped all of the different color families together and then separated out the ones that didn't need to be swatched, because I either already had them or they were duplicate pans, where Laura knew I was going to really like the color, and so she sent me 2 pans of it, which is amazing because she was spot on with which one she sent me duplicate pans of, and I do absolutely love the one she sent duplicates of. And then we arranged, because it was a lot of colors and I wanted to have some semblance of organization. You can also see the bin of swatch cards, with both metallic cards in black and matte ones in white. There were no metallics this time around. was all matte colors, which is like sort of unusual for me, but I do really like her matte colors, and there were lots of pigments this time around that were brand new to my palette, and that's always fun. It's sort of odd when you've got a palette this big to be running into new pigments, but I think there were 3 or 4 pigments this go around, maybe more, that I just don't have in my palette from any other brand, and so getting to add them in from Laura is great. This first color is Chinese Vermilion. It is a brand new color. I don't know if it's in the shop yet. It might be. I will list all the pigment info for the colors below, like I did in the last swatching video, just because I don't know all the pigment numbers for the new colors off the top of my head. As with always, I've done a diluted swatch and a full strength swatch. It's just what I do for interesting colors. It works really well for me. I'm using Strathmore 400 series paper for my swatches and labeling with a Staedtler pigment liner. This is Ruby, which is a potential replacement for Alizarian Crimson. It's based on an extinct red pigment. I don't know how Laura's gotten her hands on it. I haven't done a whole bunch of playing around with it yet. I have used it in one sort of mixing palette, but I do plan to play around with it a bunch more. It's a super pretty red. I think it might lean a bit too pink to be my daily red, but we'll find out. Which is funny because I do all my mixing palettes with pinks. This is Ocean Breeze, which is so light the camera's having trouble picking it up. It is a stunning granulating turquoise. It's so pretty. It is probably my favorite turquoisey aqua color that Laura stocks. Again, I don't know if it's in the shop yet. That's the thing with this video. These are all colors that may or may not be coming to the shop. Some of them are in the shop. Some of them might be released. Some of them it's just like playing around and testing formula for. This is Lava Lizard. So this is one of the incredibly granulating colors like Shadow Rose is. It is incredibly pretty. It's looking very orange here. It is not orange, it's very hot pink in person. It's like hot pink and dark red and a little bit purpley. That is Candy Tuft, which is a very, say, red purple. It's a lot more red than like a dioxazine violet, which I do have in my palette in a couple different brands. This is Equinox, which leans much more blue compared to the last purple. I think it's a PV15, but I will leave all the information below on it. Got a couple nice purples. I think I got 3 purples this time around because I always need purple in life. The theme of this box was purple, green, granulation, and neutrals. This is Stormbreak, which has been on my list for a while. It's been in the shop for a very long time, and I just haven't gotten it because I've got Prussian blues from other brands, and it like looks sort of similar. I would say it's a lot darker than my other Prussian blues and more teal. Really like it. I haven't painted a piece with it yet, but it is really pretty. Making sure I know what's been swatched is very important at this point. Hosta is up next, and it is a very green. It is the closest green I can compare it to is White Knight's Russian green. It is very green, it is very dark, but it is a true green. I wouldn't say it leans blue, and it doesn't really lean yellow, it's just green, and I do really enjoy that. I don't have many true greens in my palette, most of them lean yellow or blue. Pebble is the first of the new granulating grays. I don't know if it's coming to the shop. I love it. I used it in, I believe, this week's Paint Your Style that went up on Wednesday. It's such a fun color. I used a lot of these in this week's Paint Your Style, so if you saw this week's Paint Your Style, you saw a preview of lots of these colors in action, because I've already been using them in paintings. This is Mossy Glen, which is, don't know how to describe it, it's a granulating color. I've had people that have it in hand so far describe it as like what they imagine mold on a piece of bread would look like, what they imagine moss on rocks would look like. It's a brown that granulates green. It's really, really pretty. There's a really bad descriptions for like what the color looks like, but it's the best I got. This is blue granite, which unfortunately probably won't be coming to the shop, which is really sad because it is absolutely stunning in person. It is a granulating blue gray that also has some purple to it. It's so pretty. But there are some issues in making sure that it comes out the same color every time. With a granulating color as specific as that, you want to make sure that it's the same color every time. So, likelihood of coming to the shop is small, unfortunately, but it is a very pretty color. This is Bog, which is in the shop. It is a very pretty dark teal. I've used it, I think I used it in a piece I posted to Shorts this week, where I mixed it with a very exciting color that's coming up next. Might have only ended up on Instagram, might not have made it here. This is Avocado, which is a chromium green, so it's got that opacity to it. But I really like them. I've got a couple in my palette. This is Pooh. I don't love the name, but I do love the color. If you've been around and seen my palette swatch, you'll know that I have many yellow greens that sort of fall around where this color sits. I love colors that are this color. They're one of my favorite sort of sections of the color wheel, only when it comes to paint though. So I misspell this name on the swatch, but it is Barati. It is a very pretty dark green. It gets darker as it dries. It doesn't look nearly as dark when I swatched out. It's so pretty. It was a color that was created for a palette, and then we switched it out with another color because we liked the green that ended up in the palette more. But the green is still a stunning green. It granulates. It's dark. It's really, really pretty. This is Pistachio. It is much lighter green, but it is still really pretty. And then finally for greens, we have Dragon. The color that I have been lusting over for years and couldn't justify adding to my palette is the Inman Blue. I am lucky enough that Laura has included a pan of it in my palette, and there will be an entire video just on Inman Blue coming, because it deserves its own video. It's such a cool color. I did 3 different strength swatches of it because it looks so different depending on how much water you add to it. But it is such a stunning blue, and I'm really grateful that she sent me a pan of it, because it is a paint that I never thought I'd be able to justify having in my palette. I can't believe that I'm able to have it in my palette. So this color is called Little Bat. It looks almost like a very dark gray / black when you put it down on paper, but when you wash it out, magic happens. It goes incredibly blue. And of course, the camera's not picking it up. It will when I show you it on the Hex paper shortly. It is so blue-gray, it's so stunning. It is probably my favorite new granulating color in my palette. This is Phoenix, which is quinacridone gold. I don't know which version of Quin Gold it is. I don't know what the pigment is for it. So I will make sure that I leave the information below. Gingerbread is up next, and it is one of the newer browns. I'm very excited that she now has browns in the shop, because it means that I can finally put together like a full Cosmic Creations palette for traveling that works with how I paint, which is, yes, I can mix, but I'd rather not. And I've actually, for a trip I'm on right now, put together a very tiny palette of Cosmic Creations colors. This is Mocha, which is a much, it's darker than gingerbread, less orange, less bright orange. This is Van Dyke Brown, which I don't tend to use by itself, but I do use a lot when mixing, especially because it can give a really nice texture to other browns. We have Inky, which is a very, very black. I was so excited about this. I love having a really, really black in my palette. Currently, Addison and Sedgwick's Chinchilla holds that spot, but I am going to have to sort of swatch the two out side by side and see which one is going to get a spot in my permanent palette and which one is going to be in the studio palette. And then we have Raven, which is a much grayer, less opaque black while still being really, really pretty. I did go back and redo this swatch because I realized when I swatched it out wet on wet that the color was actually a lot darker than I got even on the concentrated swatch here. And the second attempt of the swatch looked a whole lot nicer, so I think I just didn't have enough paint on my brush. And finally we have Regal, which still has metal stuck to it, but whatever. It is a very, very dark purple that definitely granulates wet on wet, less so on dry paper, but is absolutely stunning on wet paper. I then went in and I worked on my hex sheet. My hex sheet swatches are wet on wet, whereas my swatch cards are wet on dry. The reason I do my hex sheets wet on wet is so that I can see what the granulation will look like. It also means that it's really easy to compare all my paints across all the brands, as any brand that I have more than about 4 or 5 colors from gets a hex sheet. So I have many of these sheets organized in a binder by brand, and they're an invaluable resource. So I just started with Phoenix, Pebble, Hosta, and Candy Tuft, and just sort of alternated hexagons going down to try and minimize colors bleeding into each other, which is always the struggle of this because I am impatient. But I do love how these hexagons make it really easy to see any granulation that's happening in the colors, and they make it easy to tell what a color is going to look like if you use it wet on wet, which is what I tend to do in Paint Your Style challenges. It's very rare that like additional layers of color will be going onto totally dry paper, and so it's important I know what the paper looks like. That color that I'm swatching right now is Lava Lizard, which already looks far less orange than it did in the initial swatch, and as it dries down continues to go more and more pink and purple, and is absolutely stunning. This is Ocean Breeze, and you can see just how pale of a color it is. It's so beautiful. This is Mossy Glen and Blue Granite. I'm going to get a whole bunch of granulating colors back to back. The biggest deal with these hex sheets is making sure that I don't get too much paint in these squares so that I can still read the names. This is Bog. This is Mocha, which I know I spelled wrong. I've gone back and I've fixed it. Brain injuries are a pain, and we all have our moments. Little Bat. This might be my favorite gray that's in my palette. Because the paper's not taped down, the water all just tends to settle whichever way the paper's warping, and so I do move it around to try and make sure that I don't get any pools of color. You can see that I didn't in the top row, and it's all pooled to the middle, and some of the names are harder to read. But I do try my best with these swatches. This is Van Dyke Brown. You can already see how, let's set it down, how Little Bat and Blue Granite are settling out into the pigments along the sides. You can even see it in Mossy Glen, how there's a little bit of like green starting to settle out. Lava Lizard starting to look sort of slightly hazy and a bit purpley. This is Stormbreak. And this is Ruby. So this is the Extinct Red pigment. And it is very red. So pretty. It really pops against all the colors that are around it. They're so like muted and not. This is Pooh, which is a very yellow green. And I touched another color. Oh, it's what the little roll of toilet paper next to my desk is for. I do use just a normal cloth for dabbing off my brushes, but for dabbing off a piece of artwork, I do use toilet paper because it doesn't contaminate paint back to the piece. For a while I used a cloth, but I found that I was getting other pigments onto the piece because the cloth already had paint on it. That was Avocado I just swatched. This is Inky. Blacks are hard to swatch, and so what I ended up doing was a very light layer, and then much later on, once it was mostly dry, going around the edge with the really full strength black. so that it sort of just like bled in, but you could still read the name. That is Dragon. We have Yin Min, which is so pretty. I've already swatched it out and compared it to Cobalt Blue Dark and Ultramarine Blue. I would say they are different. Could I have justified it for my palette at full price? I don't know yet. I think I still need some more playing around with it. I will say that it makes granulating mixes so much easier. The purple was Regal. This is Raven. And this is Pistachio. And so that is all the new colors that I got. And so you can definitely see how the granulation settled out. Then I pulled all the swatches so that you could actually see all the colors, what everything looked like together, because I think that's important. And I sort of tried to organize them into groups that made some sort of sense. The goal was that it was like sort of making sense. So we had blacks, we had neutrals, we had purples, we had like yellowy greens, we had pinky reds, we had the blues. Greens. And there we go. That is all of the new colors. And so you can definitely see the granulation in these swatches. I hope you enjoyed getting to see all the new colors swatched out. As always, I will leave all the color information below. And thank you for watching.